All right, let's get a bit more analysis about the election now with French politics specialist David Lees, who joins me from the University of Warwick. David, thanks for taking the time to speak to us. What are your thoughts now on this Monday after this incredible first round of the election last night? How do you see the week of political wrangling playing out?
Well, it was indeed a very fascinating night, wasn't it? And some very interesting results. I think in many ways the hardest part for the RN, the Rassemblement National Party, is the week ahead. As you say, it's won the largest percentage of the vote last night, but of course it's a two-round contest. As we've been talking about already on the programme, very clearly there will need to be a number of behind-the-scenes deals between the so-called New Popular Front, the left-wing coalition you've just been talking about, and perhaps Emmanuel Macron's Ensemble, the sort of more centrist coalition. I think what's very likely to happen is where we do see these potential three-way runoffs in some of the constituencies where three candidates have gone through to the second round, we'll see a number of deals behind closed doors to ensure there is only one kind of more moderate candidate going off against an RN candidate. But what I think we also need to bear in mind, as we've been establishing, is that where somebody from within the Popular Front coalition comes from the hard left, La France Insoumise, the France Unbowed party led by Jean-Luc Mélenchon, it may well be the case that voters choose perhaps to spoil their ballots or to not vote in place of voting for either a radical right party or a more radical left party with Mélenchon's group. So we will see a lot of deals behind closed doors. We'll see a lot of horse wrangling, as it were, between now and next Sunday. What I do think, as I say, is it's going to be very hard for the National Rally Party to win an overall majority on the current basis of votes. Indeed, on the basis of the European election results, arguably last night wasn't a brilliant night for the RN. Yes, they've emerged as the party with the most votes overall, but actually they are now going to have to go off in these runoffs next week, which will prove, I think, much more challenging than perhaps Jordan Bardella and his team would like to make out.
David, just a question for many people, many foreign viewers who perhaps aren't as up to snuff on French politics as you are. For many people, for many years, the National Rally, the far right, has been embodied by Marine Le Pen. Just explain to us why she's pushing forward her protege, this Jordan Bardella, for this top job of Prime Minister instead of gunning for the job herself.
Well, you're absolutely right. The Le Pen family is most closely associated with, first of all, the Front National, the National Front, and now more recently the Rassemblement National, the National Rally Party, because it's been largely their kind of family party, really, for the last 3 or 4 decades. What Marine Le Pen is hoping to do, I would suggest, is concentrate on another bid for the Élysée Palace for the presidency of France in 2027. So really kind of holding back until that point, really, to take control of the executive power overall in France, as opposed to the legislative power on the National Assembly. That's why Le Pen is pushing forward, but Bardella as her kind of protege, as you say, someone who is a telegenic, quite charismatic figure, certainly younger than Marine Le Pen, and is trying to present himself, as we've been hearing already, as a moderate and more approachable candidate than indeed Marine Le Pen herself. That's Le Pen's long game, I think, is to aim for the presidency again at the next presidential election. I think Bardella has a lot of promise in terms of the sort of hard vote of the RN, but he doesn't come from that lineage of the Le Pen family, which I think ultimately may end up counting against him in the longer term when it comes to next week's election.
You know, often in France, we say the first round you vote with your heart, the second round you vote with your head, i.e. more strategically. Do you think how will that play out, do you think, in Sunday's vote?
I think it's very likely that we'll have a similar situation to those seen previously when the National Front or the National Rally more recently has made it through to the second round runoff, whether that's at a parliamentary election or whether that's in a presidential election. And many voters will turn out and will choose to vote, as it were, with their heads against the RN to try to block the prospect of having a far-right government in power cohabiting with a centrist president in the form of Emmanuel Macron. I think it's very likely that we'll see, as I say, people voting for whether that's a left-wing coalition prospective candidate, whether that's a...
Sorry to jump in. So I guess the other question is where does this leave Macron's centrist party? Are we seeing the end of the ensemble, the Renaissance?
I think it's very likely, yes. I think given the decline in Macron's popularity over the last term of office and then more recently in his presidency, and given its failure to gain much traction in the local and national elections recently, I think that's very likely indeed.
So, David, let's talk a bit about turnout. I mean, the turnout was incredibly huge, 65% compared to 47% in the first round of the last parliamentary election 2 years ago. Was that all just due to this fear of the far right, or was it because people wanted to support the far right?
I think it's very much a combination of both. As you say, people wanted to turn out to back the far right, following on from their success at the European elections, also wanting, as you say, to block it. So a combination of those two factors. Normally, when turnout is high, this prevents an extreme right government from gaining power, extreme party from gaining power. In this occasion, what we've actually seen, as we said, is actually the far right gaining the biggest percentage of votes. So it's in some ways a kind of double-edged sword, I think, for the RN in terms of this high vote turnout.
And let's talk a bit more about, again, the sheer numbers of people who actually did turn out to vote for the far right. I mean, we've seen that number almost triple in the past 2 years. What's been happening in French society that's pushed people to vote more and more for the far right, which in just recent years was seen as something that was almost taboo?
It's very much a combination of factors. So, firstly, the far right has done a lot in terms of trying to de-demonize the party, to try and cleanse the image of the far right party, the Rassemblement National, over the last 10 years or so, particularly under Marine Le Pen's leadership, while also concentrating on the fact that Macron and his government have introduced a number of unpopular reforms. Macron remains a very unpopular, somewhat aloof president. So it's a combination of those two factors, I think, playing into the hands of the far right in terms of people going out and voting for them, as well as, of course, the ongoing impact, I think, perhaps of the COVID lockdowns and that being very associated with Macron's presidency.
All right, David, thanks so much for taking the time to speak to us. That's David Lees speaking to me there from the University of Warwick. Thank you very much.